Hi, this is Sue for Parkies and Me, My Journey with Parkinson's. Today I've called this a health passport and other information. Now, when we're at home with those who care for us, like my husband, they know our little foibles, the things that are important to us that help make caring for us easier because they know our preferences. So there's a thing called a health passport that you can get through hospitals, through social workers, and I think through GPs. And you can put in there lots of information about things that are important to you or to the person that is being written up in this health passport. And they can be things that other people may not think that are so important, but they are to that individual person that you're writing about. So I have a little story, and it's about a man who was looking after his wife. She had dementia. He was just managing to keep her at home, but he was admitting to me that he wouldn't be able to do it much longer. And he said he was really concerned about handing his wife over to people who didn't know her, didn't know what she liked to eat and all that sort of thing. Now, there was one particular thing that he was concerned about, and that was peas. Good old frozen peas that are standard issue in most rest homes everywhere. So he came and showed me a scrapbook full of pictures of his wife when she was younger. And she was beautiful, and he said that she was a model and did a lot of modelling and was very popular at the time. And he showed me some photos, and they were gorgeous. And he said when she first started modelling, a photographer said to her, "Whatever you do, don't eat peas." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And he said, because the photographer told her never to eat peas because they would bloat the stomach and make her look fat. So from that point on, she would never eat peas. And even if she had a plate full of really delicious food dished up, if there were peas on the plate and they touched any other food, the whole plate was a no-go zone. She wouldn't eat a thing. So when you think about somebody going into any kind of residential situation, whether it's going to hospital short-term or whether it's going into facility long-term, then having that sort of information is really important. And hospitals and the like have frozen peas all the time. So it's really important that they know not to put peas on her meal or else she will just flatly refuse to eat it. They might go along and think, oh, well, she's stopping eating. She doesn't want to eat anymore. She must be progressing. But if they knew about the peas, then they wouldn't have put her in that position anyway. So yeah, it's really important to this husband that it was known to those who might be caring for her in the future when he was unable to do so, that they had to make sure that there wouldn't be peas because his wife, as he said, would never eat what's on the plate. My husband that I have now, I talk about often on this podcast, he is hugely valuable to me. He cares for me, looks after me, looks out for me, and I couldn't wish for a better husband. But he is number 3. So at one stage when I was working, particularly my social work manager, when I mentioned a husband, he would say, "Oh, which one would that be? 1, 2 or 3?" I made the mistake of calling my husband my current husband one day, and he turned around and said, "Oh, is he due to be shipped off and another one brought in?" And I said, no, current and forever husband, this one. But my 3 husbands, the first one was my children's father, and we got married very young. I was only 18 and I had my first child at 20. And we split up when my daughter was about, I think, 5 years old, just after she started school. And we were just too young to get married, and a lot of things happen as they do in marriages, but we weren't strong enough, experienced enough to get through them, and so separated and ultimately divorced. We had our challenges, but there was no violence, no danger involved. We just couldn't be together anymore, for many reasons. Then, about a year and a half to 2 years after I split from my children's father, I met another man, and in the fullness of time, probably within about 6 months to a year perhaps of knowing him, we got married. Now, he was a very kind and helpful person when we first got together. Was good to me, was good to the children, but things slowly started to go wrong, and he became a totally different person in time. He'd always smoked marijuana, and he wasn't the only one. As lots of us dabble in these things, over time, he became a big drinker, and he used to drink really strong alcohol. And when he was drinking, he was not a nice person. He was verbally abusive, psychologically abusive, and my life with him took a really bad turn, and ultimately I had to leave him for my safety and for the safety of my children. So I left him and I moved myself and my children to Christchurch to do my social work course and to just have safety and family around me as I continue to raise my children. My third husband, my current husband, I met on the internet. I actually had a boarder who lived with me for a while and encouraged me to try internet dating, and I said, oh look, I'm not that desperate yet that I have to do internet dating. He goes, no, it's a bit of a laugh. He said, you meet some nice people, even if you just go out for a coffee and things like that, it doesn't have to be a big deal. So after a few very false starts of, well, I would describe them as utter drop kicks, guys who, honestly, I was beginning to think I was completely wasting my time when I got a message from the man who was to become my third husband. Didn't rush into anything. We didn't live together for a year or two, and our relationship has always been a good one, always been a strong one, and I'm very lucky to have him. I cannot imagine, I just wouldn't have coped with my second husband with all this health issues that have been going on for me. He certainly wouldn't have been there for me. In fact, he would probably have made it worse. So the reason I'm talking about this is I had a chat to my husband tonight and I said, this may sound like a strange thing, but Parkinson's doesn't just affect the physical in a person that has Parkinson's. It also affects thinking and the memory. There can be dementia that sort of rolls on in along the way. And so I talked to my husband and said, this may sound weird, but if I get forgetful, if I have cognitive issues down the track, and I say something about my husband being abusive, I need people to know that it's not you that I'm talking about. I need people to know that it's my second husband who was the abusive one. And in my mind, I might have gone back to that time when I was married to a man who I was frightened of, who was not a safe person for me to be with. I would be mortified, I would be crushed if somebody were to think, if I started to talk about my abusive husband, if they started to think that they needed to protect me from the husband that I have now, that he was in some way dangerous and shouldn't be allowed to be with me, or needed to be chaperoned or whatever. So the health passport, I said, if I get one of those and I make it up and I talk about my 3 husbands, then if I start to talk about feeling unsafe, being scared of my husband, nobody is going to look at my husband that I have now and think that relates to him. And that's really important to me, that people support my husband that I love and don't think ill of him by some mistake, and then the word spreads that I have an abusive husband. That is very much husband number 2, not husband number 1, and not husband number 3, who is my forever. So yeah, the health passport is important for somebody like me who's been around the tracks for a while, had more than one relationship, and that the information is useful to have. There's other things like the meal preferences in the health passport. They're really handy to have so that people know what you like to eat and what you don't like to eat. It also talks about any particular religion that you believe in, whether you need to go to church, whether you don't need to go to church, whether you need to have confession heard. Any of the things that are important to you as a person is really useful to have in this document. It also talks about the important people in my life, like my husband, who's my enduring power of attorney for welfare and for property, and also talks about other health issues that I might have, and of course I have several. Another thing that is important is to put down the important people in my life, and of course my husband would be number 1, and my cousin Kat is my second contact. But I would also put information about my children and my grandchildren in that document. It might say things about whether I need assistance to get in and out of bed, whether I need help to get dressed, brush my hair, a number of things. And things that make me anxious. We all have our little quirks and things that are important to us that people need to know about. So yeah, if you haven't seen this thing called a health passport, I'd recommend that you ask your GP or a social worker in the hospital if you go to see a social worker in the hospital or they come to see you. They're a very handy thing to have, and I really do recommend getting one. Either getting one in physical form, which might be easier, or filling one in online and saving that somewhere. But I think I would probably do a combination of the two. Another thing that can be useful to have on there, I remember many times people who had dementia being described as wandering. I was attending a talk by a person who was really skilled in working with people with dementia, and he lived in Christchurch and he had a good understanding of the way Christchurch people work. And I've never known anywhere so much where people love to walk, walking on beaches, walking on trails in the bush, tramping over the Port Hills, all those sorts of things, going up Mount Grey, Mount Thomas and other mountains in Christchurch. And this person who was giving the talk said, we use the word wandering, and that implies that a person is just ambling off with no plan. And he said, for many people, it's not an aimless wandering. It has started with purpose. And because a lot of people in Christchurch belong to tramping groups and like to go for walks and things like that, if you've been a tramper, like my husband is, he hates being cooped up. Much as he loves our home, he hates being cooped up for too long without getting out in the fresh air and having a decent walk. And for him, a decent walk would be 3 to 4 hours, and it used to be up to 6 when we were younger. And so somebody like him, who'd been used to having these long walks, might have dementia and might not have a great sense of direction. He might wake up and look out the window and see a beautiful day and think, I'm going to get my pack on, grab me a bottle of water, and I'm going to go for a tramp. So they do. They may not remember to grab the bottle of water even, but know that they want to and need to go for a long walk. And so they'll head out the door and just enjoying outdoors in the fresh air, but they can't remember the way home, or they're not safe crossing the streets and things like that. So it's a natural thing for them that they've done probably for 20, 30 years to see the sunshine, get themselves organised and go for a walk up and down Dale for 3-4 hours easy. And so it's, as the lecturer said, it's not really wandering, it's not lacking purpose. They start off with a purpose in mind. They might be going to the dairy to get some milk. Then they get distracted and they go for a longer walk than they intended. And then they can't find their way home. So, yes, it's important, I think, when you're working with people that have cognitive issues, to have somewhere written down what the risk factors are for somebody like this person with dementia who just wanted to go for a nice long walk and didn't see any problem with it. Or the risk factor of this woman who'd previously been a beautiful model, who would not eat anything on her plate if she had peas. And so if people didn't know about the peas, then they would just think that she was basically going on a hunger strike, perhaps, that she was refusing to eat any of her meals and wouldn't be able to figure out, in all likelihood, that it was the peas that were the issue. So, like most people, I have my quirks, I have my idiosyncrasies, which way round the toilet roll should be. I almost always change it. If it's running down the wall, I can't handle it. I have to have it draped over the outside. That is the correct way to do it, the only correct way to do it. And so, yeah, I'll change it in people's houses because I can't deal with it. So we all have funny little rituals, funny little things that we need to happen in our lives, and mine is my toilet roll needs to be on the right way. So I think probably even if I was reasonably forgetful, I don't think I'd forget that in a hurry, because it's something that I've always done. And I know it's a bit funny, but I know a lot of people that are like that and have their little things that need to happen for them to feel comfortable. So yeah, have a look for the health passport and have a look at the sort of information that is needed in it, and it can be a useful document. And it's also important when you talk to people that have cognitive issues to verify what they're saying, because sometimes they can say things that you think, no, that's ridiculous, that can't be true, and yet it can be. As an example, when I was a social worker, we used to organise for some of the people with dementia to go to a day club, which was secure, but it was a place where they could socialise, where they could play cards, where they played games. Sometimes some of them did baking, and it was a really good place for someone to be for a day or so that their carer could get a break. And so I met the daughter and client or patient at this place. It was called Harakeke Club. And I often used to try and be there so that I could help them to look around, to ask the questions that they needed to ask. And so I met this daughter and her mum was just a wee dot, and she was quite far along the journey of dementia. And so the lady that ran the place started asking her a few questions, and she said to her, "Did you ever work?" And she said, "Yes, I did." And she said, "What did you do?" And she said, "I was a trapeze artist in a circus." And myself and the manager looked at each other quite stunned, and then we looked at the daughter, and the daughter was nodding. She goes, She was a trapeze artist in the circus." And I thought, she must have some good work stories, I tell you. But we both cracked up. If the daughter hadn't been there, we'd be like, yeah, right, of course you were. When in fact she had been a trapeze artist in the circus, and it certainly put a smile on our face. So yeah, think about what people need to know about you so that you get the care that you need, so that you feel comfortable and perhaps a little more understood. So this has been Sue for Parkies and me, my journey with Parkinson's. Kia kaha, be brave, be strong, be you.